Hey there, I'm Tony DeCopel. Welcome to the Uplift. We got a great show for you, a great cast of characters as well. Among them, these, a couple who took a stand against discrimination more than 60 years ago, and they still inspire young students today. Also, a man whose life drastically changed in a split second. He didn't let tragedy deter him. In fact, it inspired him. We also go inside a time travel mart that's filled with oddities like a phone to the future. But what's behind the store is what you really need to see. Plus, David Begnaud and an eye-opening chat with Steve Gleason, how he's dedicated more than 20 years to empowering people with ALS. All that and much, much more. You're watching The Uplift. Hey there, welcome to The Uplift, the show that lifts you up for at least the next 30 minutes. You, and I like to say me as well, and we begin with a lesson in activism. And a couple whose fight against discrimination is now more than 60 years old, but still inspiring kids today. Here's Steve Hartman.
Good morning. You know Meryl.
Hi, and welcome to our lesson on activism.
And as always, we start our lesson with Emmett at the dictionary desk.
Activism is when you do something to bring about change, typically social or political change.
Excellent. And it can be something big and bold, like a 1,000,000-person march on Washington, or it can be something so simple, even a child can do it. Want to see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's turn now to our library of stories past for the best example I have of activism in action.
At the Mount Airy Resort in the Poconos of Pennsylvania, Reverend Gilbert Caldwell and his wife Grace are arriving for their second honeymoon.
We're here.
They were greeted warmly.
How are you?
A sharp contrast to their first visit, 60 years earlier. In 1957, they were married in North Carolina, then drove 8 hours, only to be turned back for being black.
How did they put it? Did they give you a reason?
First, they pretended I didn't have a reservation, where I actually brought a copy. And then, of course, they said, but if we said yes, our guests would be very unhappy.
They had to stay at a black-owned hunting lodge instead.
Men with these big guns.
Not what you were planning on for your honeymoon?
Not what we were planning on.
Prodded partly by that experience, Gil immersed himself in the civil rights movement, working side by side with Martin Luther King Jr., which is how he ended up at Bear Tavern Elementary in Titusville, New Jersey. He told the honeymoon story, as he'd done 100 times before. But for whatever reason, this group of fifth graders really took it to heart.
At the end of the story, I was like, that's just terrible.
It was really heartbreaking. I feel like this is the worst thing that someone could do to someone.
Even months after the Caldwells' visit, kids like Emily Eshelman were still this affected.
You feel bad for them that they had to go through that?
A ton.
A ton.
Which is why each fifth grader wrote a letter to Mount Airy. One said, "The Caldwells made me think about not only standing up for myself, but standing up for others and fixing mistakes that were made in the world." In closing, the kids requested an all-expense-paid honeymoon redo, which they got.
It makes me feel really good inside because we know that even though we're just kids, we made an impact on the world.
It was really magnificent to know that kids cared that much. Oh, the rug feels so nice.
I should mention that the original Mount Airy was torn down years ago.
What a beautiful place.
This is a new building with new owners who were just so impressed with the kids, they wanted to help make it right.
Maybe was this worth waiting 60 years for?
Obviously, this does not make up for decades of racial injustice, but it's a step and a sign that we can get there.
Gilbert died back in 2020, but that honeymoon redo and the kids who made it possible continue to inspire. One of those kids, Emily Eshelman, joins us now. Hello, Emily.
Hi, how are you?
Great.
What grade are you in now?
I'm about to be a freshman in college.
Why do you think the Caldwell story affected you so deeply?
Like growing up, I was like emotional or I would cry sometimes and I would be embarrassed by it. But then I realized feeling that much, it really does go a long way of helping other people.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I would love to write children's books. Just words can be so strong, and the Caldwells taught me that my words could have an impact, and I see my future having something to do with the world of writing.
I think one thing I've learned from you is that at the heart of activism is empathy. When you can feel somebody else's pain, it makes you want to go out and fix it.
I completely agree.
Right? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
When Emily and her classmates wrote those letters, they had no idea what, if anything, would come from them. Activism doesn't guarantee results, but it does guarantee our democracy, especially when even the smallest voices are heard. We'll see you next time.
And don't forget to stay kind.
Coming up, the oddities in the time travel mart, they are eye-catching, but what's behind the shelves is what you really need to see. What is it? Well, you're gonna find out after the break. The time travel mart in Los Angeles is stocked with oddities, dinosaur eggs, a phone that calls into the future, they say. But behind the shelves of these quirky artifacts is a door that leads to a laboratory and the real reason behind this unusual shop. Jasmine Veal has more.
It's a storefront that's hard to miss. Once inside, this shop has plenty of the unique and strange, where one can shop for dinosaur eggs or make a call to the future. This is the Echo Park Time Travel Mart, and it is anything but normal.
So we come through here, this is our wormhole.
Behind the store, through a door in the back, is the real reason this place exists.
And this is our Echo Park Writing Lab.
Jaime Balboa is the executive director of 826LA. The Time Travel Mart helps fund the nonprofit organization that works with more than 6,000 students a year, teaching them creative writing through its free programs and publishes their work.
Sounds of freedom beats on the concrete. I could smell it from a room away.
Juliana Hernandez, now 18, began coming here in the 2nd grade.
My mom needed a place to have her kids at while she continued to work, and we also needed help with my reading and writing skills.
She became one of the published student authors.
This is the last book that I did my senior year of high school. It's a book about food.
She went on to intern here and is now in college.
Opened my eye with the different networks that are around me.
826LA is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and 100% of the proceeds from the Time Travel Mart go right back to these writing programs for students.
Oh, how I wish our days together were longer.
Hernandez reads the quote she wrote on the store's creative expression wall and says, while sadly her time here is done, she hopes this space continues to shape the future of storytelling and education. In Echo Park, Jasmine Veal, KCAL News.
Coming up, we take you to Split Second Fitness, a gym inspired by how your life can drastically change really without warning, and how you can still make the most of it. Mark Raymond Jr.'s life changed in a split second when an accident left him paralyzed. He decided to be inspired by that dramatic change in his life and to help others just like him. Here's Omar Villafranca with his story.
It's upper body day at the gym for Mark Raymond Jr. First, shoulders. Then, chest and arms.
Push, back.
But the 35-year-old's workouts are a bit different.
We focused on things that can be adjusted to being seated equipment.
The small adjustments, like a seated elliptical bike, help out the majority of clients here at Split Second Fitness.
Straight, stand tall.
Raymond created the gym in New Orleans not only for himself, but for others with different needs.
Who is your typical client?
We've got strokes, we've got spinal cord injuries, we've got cerebral palsy.
Raymond's life changed on the 4th of July weekend in 2016 when an accident on Lake Pontchartrain left him paralyzed.
It was a normal day. What was different was Mom was not there to scream, "Mark, don't dive off the boat." I hit my head on the sandy bottom and I couldn't move.
Raymond woke up a couple of weeks later from a medically induced coma. That's when he found out he fractured the 5th vertebrae in his neck and could no longer walk or fully use his hands.
What's going through your mind?
Everything. Am I still going to find love? Am I still going to, have friends?
Nothing that you mentioned there is physical. You're thinking mental things.
Yeah. It was all the mental things. The physical things, I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't change it.
Raymond went from being a social butterfly, an outdoorsman, to a loner after the accident.
I was going through a lot. The suicidal thoughts, the depression, it was the guilt, the grief.
One day, while scrolling through Instagram, he found a rehab facility in California.
Seeing a room of empty wheelchairs and people doing things that doctors told me I couldn't do. That effort to challenge the norm, to go the extra mile, was really, I think, what hooked me.
The 3 months he spent there changed his life.
I knew after the first month there that I needed to bring something like that to New Orleans. The guy who drugged me out of the water, my best friend, and I was talking to him about this idea, and he said, dude, you should just call it Split Second. Your life changed in a split second.
2 years after his accident, Raymond started the Split Second Foundation. In 2021, he opened his gym, and next year, it will move into a building with 5 times more space.
I lived as a different person in a different body for 45 years, and now I'm living a different life.
Like Jennifer Dean, who came to Split Second more than 2 years ago after suffering a stroke. We met Dean during her workout, which consisted of biking and restorative yoga.
And the people that I've met here, and the support that I've gotten, and the friends and the community. That's really been the most integral part of all of it.
A life-changing event isn't easy, but Raymond says he wants to push his clients to get better in a supportive environment.
We want them to feel like they belong, like they have a purpose, like they have a home.
Raymond is still pushing himself, setting a goal to get back on a boat again soon.
This is Louisiana's sportsman's paradise.
Is that your next game, getting back on a boat?
I think so. I want a boat I can roll this chair on and still roll around the boat a little bit and have a good time.
Maybe that's your next project.
It's not a bad idea.
I'm Omar Villafranca in New Orleans.
Up next, NFL legend Steve Gleason gives a hug unlike anyone you've ever met. Why? Well, because the retired football star has battled ALS for decades, and he recently opened up to David Begnaud about his personal journey and how he's helping others. Former NFL player Steve Gleason was diagnosed with ALS more than 20 years ago, and since then, he and his wife, Michelle, have made it their mission to empower others who have that debilitating disease. David Begnaud sat down with the couple to hear their story of triumph and of hope.
America first met Steve Gleason back in 2006. When he blocked a punt during the New Orleans Saints' first home game after Hurricane Katrina. It symbolized a rebirth in New Orleans. After 8 years in the NFL, Steve retired in 2008. In 2011, he was diagnosed with ALS. That same year, he and his wife Michelle started Team Gleason, a foundation which has provided over $40 million in technology, equipment, and care services to people living with ALS. Because of his heart and his chutzpah, Steve was honored at the ESPYs in July with the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage. It is an honor that is given to those who possess strength, courage, and the willingness to stand up for their beliefs.
One of my favorite people, Steve Gleason, is here with his wife, Michelle. Welcome to Times Square.
Thanks for having us.
First off, David, Michelle and I would like to express our gratitude for you and all of the CBS Mornings team. We're grateful for your time, patience, and effort sharing our story. And we had a great time with you yesterday at the US Open. Thanks, y'all. We love you.
Steve, in the book, your wife, Michelle, has described your diagnosis as you going from frustrated to fearful to angry. Where are you now?
The readers will see that 13 years of living with this gnarly disease, and I'm over a decade past my expiration date, so I have the wilderness of fear tattooed all over me. Through the process of losing control of everything, the one thing that seemed to be at least somewhat in my control was my mindset. Where am I now, David? I like to think of ALS as something of a postdoctorate research project on being human. It's like I'm investigating what can people do to move from fear to freedom, from suffering to strength, from loss to love, or from hell to heaven. This body may be a prison, but my mind is free.
That's beautiful, Steve. I mean, it's the profundity to your words are so deeply moving. Where are you on that question?
I'm still frustrated, angry. It's difficult. I have not transcended all like Steve has, but I'm also able to move and talk and feel. I am proud of him for where he is, because I really can't imagine, being around it, I can't imagine being, having to do what he does every day, but being on the other side, I'm still taking care of the kids, helping with him, more in a real world, and wishing that he could do more for him, more for me, more for the kids. At the same time, so grateful that he is here with us and able to do all he does for us.
Michelle, you are radically candid in the book about things like intimacy, communication, all that kind of stuff. Be radically candid with us about your struggle with his lack of ability to communicate with you.
It is literally sometimes nearly impossible. His technology doesn't always work. His eyes get tired, and if some days I just want to be like, I just wish today we could have like a regular conversation to figure out the next week. And again, when you have a 12-year-old and a 5-year-old, it's painful to watch, because I know how much he wants to be communicating with them, because communication is, for humans, basically everything.
I want to talk to you about that legendary punt block back in 2006. You call it one of your proudest moments. I wonder what goes through your mind when you relive that moment from 2006.
In 2006, when I blocked that punt on Monday Night Football, it was undoubtedly a phenomenon that was much more important than winning a football game. But I didn't realize just how much more until a text conversation with Brian Johnson. Brian is a former pastor from New Orleans who was diagnosed with ALS in 2020 and has become a dear and trusted friend. Brian asked me, I'm curious, if you hadn't blocked that punt, do you think your reach and impact on ALS would be the same? My answer was, if I don't block the punt, I'm probably not alive. He was appreciative of my brutal honesty, and his response was, so if you hadn't blocked the punt, then I'm probably not alive either. He said, at the time I was just excited. Some long-haired surfer dude lifted my spirits after I lost everything in Katrina. But you actually saved my life. So many people have told us that our foundation's efforts and support have saved their lives. But if I didn't block that punt, I'm just another has-been football player. It's probable that I just fade away and die anonymously. I don't see any of this happening. But here we are. I did block the punt, David. And this community, my family and friends, and their love, continue to uplift me and Michelle throughout this crazy, wonderful journey with ALS.
12 years ago, Mr. Steve, you said we all have a timeline. And given the fact that you're still here today, how is living like you have a timeline different than maybe it was 12 years ago?
Yes, David, I find the truth that we all have a timeline absolutely beautiful. And how about this, David? Live like today is the last day you will be able to move, talk, and breathe on your own. How would your perspective shift? Will you be more appreciative and less concerned about achievement or material success? Knowing this is your last day of moving, when you hug your child or your partner, when you hold their hand or run your hand through their hair, knowing this is the last time, how much will you appreciate the preciousness of the moment? If I were to request anything from people, it would be practice living with a timeline. Please fully appreciate and truly love this wonderful life.
Mic drop.
Lastly, the hug. Tell me how he gives a hug.
So his, I'm going to show you.
Yeah, tell me, what does he call
So
it?
he says,
Before we go, I want to give you a hug, because I know you give everybody a hug. So what's it called?
Faux-to-faux.
Faux-to-faux.
So it's forehead to forehead, so he can't hug you. You look him in the eyes, and then you put your forehead on his forehead. You can stay as long as you'd like, short or long.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the wisdom and all the grace. Thank you. Rooting for you. Thank you.
That is our show. I hope the news brightened your day, lifted you up. I know it did for me. If for some reason it didn't work for you, those reruns, they remain free. Isn't that right, Jared? I'll see you next time. I'm going to find some good news.